We'll call this, or reconvene, I should say, from our regular September meeting. The purpose of our meeting tonight is, as stated before, is to discuss what our situation currently is for our reval, and we'll be calling several people and having some discussion on that. We do have a couple other items I'd like to mention. I do have a thank you note here I'd like to share. It's dear Macon County Commissioners and employees, thank you for your thoughts, prayers, and kindness during this difficult time. And that was for the family of Buster Burnett. It says thank you for the beautiful flowers. Your thoughtfulness is appreciated. So I did want to share that. We do have, I think we're going to have a short closed session tonight. We've got a property acquisition discussion we need to have in closed session. That will follow. I don't know that we'll have anything to report out of that, but we do need to be updated on that. I also would like to recognize our attorney, Chester Jones. He's got one quick piece of information he needs to share with us.
I got a real quick one. Last, at your regular meeting, we approved a lease agreement with Duke Energy for the Manhattan Recreation property. As I got ready to send this to Duke, I realized that we probably should have a pre-audit certificate on that document. And so I'm asking for your authority to put that pre-audit certificate on there and to authorize the same officer, Chairman Jack, to sign it with that pre-audit certificate.
So moved. Second.
We got a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Record show the motion carried now.
And that may be the shortest thing I've ever brought.
It could well be.
We're done, Chester. You're done.
The next thing we have before we get to our main topic of discussion tonight is I'd like to recognize Ms. Southern. She has a couple of budget amendments that each of you gentlemen I think have in front of you. Ms. Southern, if you'd like to explain those to us.
Thank you. I apologize, I did not remember these. I got in a hurry to copy them and failed to number them.
We'll call them 1 and 2.
1 and 2, please. The first one is Macon County Schools. This is to appropriate $22,302 from fund balance to pay for a portion of an activity bus. And there's backup there. We got the invoice from them. The bus was $87,602. And if you remember, we had the $65,300 number that we kicked around.
It's fairly
pretty
familiar.
freely from the Nantahala project. So when we deduct that, that leaves $22,302 for that bus. And I think there is a second bus in their capital outlay budget for the new year, 2012. Number 2 is to appropriate $5,000 that we received from the health department, health education money, and last year that was not spent and we carried forward.
Thank you, Ms. Southern. Gentlemen, you've heard the 2 budget adjustments. We will need a motion.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
We got a motion by Commissioner Bill, a second by Commissioner Cuthbert. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Let the record show that carried unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, the main topic of discussion and the reason we're here tonight is to discuss what our situation is on property revals. A little bit of short history, and Richard, you correct me if I'm wrong, I'm probably going to be, but traditionally Macon County has been on an 8-year cycle traditionally. In about 96 or 2000.
Actually, 2003 was our first 4-year cycle.
In 2003, we did a 4-year cycle, and we followed that up in 2007 with a 4-year cycle. The reason that was done was various reasons, but one was that the property values were rising so quickly that homeowners and landowners were getting sticker shock with an 8-year window, and so we thought that it would be a little bit less onerous if we did a 4-year cycle. So we did 2 4-year cycles, and our next 4-year cycle was to be in 2011. Of course, by that time, the housing crisis had hit, and we were seeing a lot of odd pricing for housing. I'll call it that. A lot, obviously, mostly downward. And the main problem we had then, and we made a decision as a board to put it off for at least 2 years, and with the idea that we would, in 2013, do a rebalance on a 6-year cycle. And the reason was, there are very few legitimate comps, which are comparisons of similar housing close by and in a localized area, where we felt we could get really appropriate, legitimate, and realistic values. Of course, since that time, when we're coming up on the time we'd have to start in 2012 to start the process, we actually need to start in about October right now to get the process so that we would have the revaluations in 2013. And what we've begun to see is the housing market, if anything, has gotten worse, and there have been fewer sales. And I'll recognize our tax person here, Richard Leitner, and he can share more of that with us. But in a nutshell, because we're not, it looks like we don't have a lot of comps, even less than we had before, it may put the county in a position of having to defend revaluation values, if I can say it that way, that might be difficult to defend because we may not have enough information to go forward. So with that kind of a prelude, I'll recognize Mr. Light.
Well, Board, it's good to be here, and hopefully, when some of us spoke over the last couple of weeks, even months, we wanted the public to be fully aware of what's going on. Unlike the times that our chairman just mentioned, where values went up so quickly in the sticker shock of getting a tax bill at 4 years that doubled or tripled, the values are going down now, so it creates a totally different scenario, something that Macon County hadn't ever seen and since the early 70s, you know, when things didn't sell at all. So what does that mean now? Well, we're scheduled for the year 2013, and that's not the mandated year.
Can I ask a question right there for, at least for me, Ron and Haley, you're the newer members, don't work here when you put it up. If we leave it like it is, we don't change anything, give us this, when do you do the appraisals, and when does that affect the tax bill? When would that be?
Okay, if we don't change anything,
Don't do anything.
the first tax bill would be 2013. July 2013, you'd get new tax bills, new budgets, new tax rates.
So it'd be the bill that you'd have to pay late in 2013 before January 2014.
Correct.
Okay.
And
That
just,
was a year off.
yeah, and just for a little bit of clarification, the reason we're meeting now is the tax collector's office, if we were to stick to that schedule, and this is why we need to make a decision now, basically, he would have to start, and all of his employees, they would have to start in about October coming up.
Well, actually, we're working on it. There's a lot of background work. It takes over 2 years to do. The problem that we'll run into, and the key for the board is, you have to approve the schedule of values. And you have to do that, say, May of this coming year, June, and it lays in what's the word? It lays open for the public to look at them, examine them,
And what is that?
it's basically the book that you appraise property with. It's a rule book.
It's a standard.
It's standard
Yeah,
appraisal
so it looks
method.
at the various types of properties that you have in the county.
So it's not the actual appraisals of.
No, it's a manual.
Okay. Okay.
And to design that manual and create that manual, you got to go back to the marketplace, get the comparable sale, comparable data that you need, and you compile it. It's like an audit book that you see from auditors, but it's for real estate. So that lays in, the board has to approve it, let it lay for so many days. Then the public have the right to appeal to the tax commission if they see something they don't agree with in there. And at that time, the tax commission would hold a hearing. If something like that happens, the reval's put on hold until the tax commission gets to you. Now, that's a high priority. It takes precedent over everything, but it still messes up your whole schedule. So, that's what we'll have to start working on in January, compound that record.
And that again is, just for clarification, that's the process by which we will use to revalue the property.
Correct.
It's not the revals haven't been done yet, we've just got to agree and approve.
And that's that timeframe, so next July. So you won't actually start doing the revals until early 2013 or late 2012?
No, we're already doing business.
Oh, you're already gone, okay.
Because see, once that is put in, that's a computer computations and that would put it back. But if it's appealed, then everything's on hold. And depending on the case, you may have to come back and tweak your schedule. And if you do that, then it adds months to your whole process. So if that goes through, nobody complains, then we take, say, in June, July, we apply that schedule to get the notices out by December of 2012. So it's a real condensed time frame.
So, okay, I misunderstood what you said there. So you'll send out the new valuation notices will be sent out.
Should be sent out by December 2012.
But before he can legitimately reval or revalue everything, we have to approve the
You gotta go through
process
those
by
steps.
which he's going to use.
That's not the tax bill.
That's not the tax bill.
It's not the tax bill.
But that's just your,
That's just for
The
value.
appraisal, it's just
It's
a
just
schedule.
for
of
appraisal.
change.
Schedule of value.
so then the new appraisal wouldn't take effect until the next year.
January 1, 13.
13. January 1, 13 is the effective date of the appraisal.
So that,
But you have to have the schedule of values in, and probably, when, Richard?
This coming May, June.
A year and a half before your revaluation values are sent out. You gotta have a book that tells you how to price all the land and all the buildings, residential, commercial, etc. You gotta have that schedule of values, that book, in order to appraise all the different pieces of property. And so the process Richard's talking about on the schedule of values is they put that together based on market sales and so forth, and then they present the schedule of values to the Board of County Commissioners. You then in turn have a public hearing, put it on display for the public to look at, and then they decide if anybody takes exception to that schedule of values. Like Richard said, it holds your whole process up. If somebody came in and said, basically, I think your schedule of values for vacant land is too high, too low, based on what they think, and they file an appeal against that, then you gotta go through until you can't do anything until you get that schedule of values approved. Because that's the manual that you use to appraise all the property for the revaluation, and for every year after that until the next revaluation. The revaluation, the schedule we're using right now was adopted 2006, is that right?
Correct.
And so it's the same values have been used since 2006 for all property since then.
and the other piece of that
Should be
is,
one in my desk somewhere.
generally, you're not gonna have a lot of people argue about the process. When the squealing comes is when they actually get the tax bill.
Generally, we've not had that. The only time we had it was Harry Wright, and then in 1983 did, and it, post along the whole process. But the county won, but it still adds months of delay. So that's the key. It's not like we can just wait until January of 2013 and have it done. You got a sequence of events that are interlocked, and you got to follow it through.
Well, I hate to interrupt you, but I did that in my mind. I didn't get this.
So
It is confusing.
Yeah.
It really is.
So-
The machinery act, the whole machine, if you've never sat down and tried to look at it, Kevin, go by Richard's office, and if you ain't got nothing to do, read one chapter of that baby.
But again, that's why we're meeting at this point in time, because we gotta come to some decision pretty soon, because Richard won't have the time required to get all the pieces in place.
And not to say that we hadn't been doing things, we have been looking at the market and that, because we had planned for 11 and then 13, so, we monitor the market quite frequently. So the mandate now is, in some of the articles and comments that you've read in different publications, said, why stop the mandated revow? Well, the mandated date is January 1, 2015. The only thing required in the state of North Carolina is that you can do it between 1 year and 8 years, 8 year being the max. So up until 2003, we was on an 8 year cycle. So we have to do for that. What happens any time in between, if the board of commissioners in any county want to move that time frame up or back, all they do is adopt a resolution, send it to Department of Revenue, and they basically rubber stamp it and go on. That's the law at present. If it changes next year, you know, we'll deal with it, whatever it is, but that's the way it is. Let me go back. Okay, the revaluation is not to gain new revenue. It's not to increase or decrease the tax rate. Basically what you want to do, our process, our function is to equalize values to where the market is over every type of property. And that's where we have the problem right now. Not every property type is selling, not everything's got good comps, and to build that schedule, you have to have that. A lot of people say, well, you just want to hold this off so you can get more money or whatever. Well, I'll show you the mathematics of that in a minute. But regardless what we do, the budget process is separate from the assessment process. The two do come together to formulate a tax rate and the amount of taxes, but they're two distinct problems. Okay, the sale.
Just a minute. Somebody, Chair, you lost your screen. I never have that. Well, I'll just glance over here, look on this one. I'll just glance over here, I can see it. Here, I printed my one. All right, there you go.
Down there, Brian.
Huh?
Another plug down there. No, it's what it is.
I got this since Ronnie, thank you, Ronnie.
Did you turn?
But don't come back up on it.
Well, I tried to cut
Would
it
you guys
on.
like a picture of this?
I tried to cut it on about 3 feet. Oh, there's a power just came in.
There it goes.
There we go.
Ronnie fixed it.
Yeah, don't worry, I tell you what, that's what a builder do.
He's ready to hit the tree.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay, now this screen is the Franklin multiple listing service. And it shows you, and the reason I use Franklin because it's very difficult to get the information off of the Highlands cashiers, but they have a separate system. However, this is represents what happening down here is happening up there even to a greater extent. If you look at the sales in 2006, there was 1,100 sales in MLS. 2007, it dropped to 800. 2008, 500. 2009, 400. And last year, 500 again. We're running on for this year about the 400 to 500 number again. Well, that shows, well, that's 50%. Well, the Franklin MLS represents about 1/3 of all the sales in the county. First you got the Highlands area, then you got everyone that sells or has deeds recorded that don't go through a realtor or MLS listing. So that's but that gives you an idea of how far the sales are off. For this year,
Let me ask a question, we'll flip back to that.
okay,
Now, those numbers on that chart, is that all arm's length transactions, or does that include foreclosures and?
that's foreclosures, everything.
That's the next slide.
Okay, I'm sorry. Gotta get it with that.
Okay, right now, 2011 sales of that 400 or 500, and this is through July, and I noticed there's an article in one of the publications recently said 4% of foreclosures. Well, Kevin and I counted the sales. Right now, through July of this year, 54% of the sales of foreclosures were sales by county agents, being somebody at Prudential or somewhere selling properties in another county. And then even those sales are foreclosures because they got to deal with banks and things like that to represent all their sales. So we don't even have 1 out of 2 sales are going to be good sales. Only 46% could classify as qualified, but then if you look at and verify those numbers, it drops further because some sales are family members, some sales are not arm's length transaction sales, short sales, and things like that. And if you look at commercial sales, I think there was 3 in the last year, actual true commercial sales. And you know, some people say, well, use it. Well, just use. Do you want me to go out there and use the Walmart Center as one of the sales and put your every commercial piece of property at that price? No. Or do you want me to take one in the center of Old Edwards Inn that's sold or something like that? So that becomes a real problem when you try to use it. So that's all that we have out there now for that. Improved property. When you start looking at improved property, this is just the buildings. It's not the land associated with it, because some can be on a lot, some can be on acreage. Of the houses under 299,000, there's roughly 19,000 of them. Of the houses over 300,000, there's 3,300 of those. So that equals about 22,300 improved residential properties. Now, if you look at the values, the houses greater than 300,000 represents a $1.9 billion in value. So that's 3,300 houses represent $1.9 billion in value. The other 20,000 houses represent $2.1 billion in value. So that you can see how a small number adds up to a large price. So the total residential value is $4 billion. That's just buildings. That don't include the land or other top properties.
And just for mine or anybody else, the improved residential property, that's people that have asked for permit. Is this correct? Is that people who have asked for permits to add on to this, that?
Improved, that's anything that's got a living quarters on it. A house, mobile home, a mansion. It could be anything that for
Regardless of
residential.
the age, it's just not barely with habit.
It didn't mean improved, it just means there's a street. I got right.
It's habit.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I was confused. Okay.
Okay. What will happen? Best projections, you know, until we get the schedule value and everything else based on the market, we need $26 million of tax revenue brought in locally. So the old assessed value is $9.3 billion, every type of property. That's everything we have. So the new assessment value would be somewhere around $7.3 billion. Revenue neutral.
That's based on a projection, not on actual.
Projection. It's not actual, because you can't get actual until you get the schedule and apply the schedule.
And let's be clear, Jack, if using that figure of 26 million, that would be a figure to keep our budget exactly where it is.
Yeah, that's a little over half of the total operating revenue.
Of 42.
Yeah,
But that's what comes in from ad valorem,
property tax
Yeah.
alone.
property taxes.
And
Okay.
go ahead. The revenue, I'm just gonna say, the revenue neutral would be exactly the division of the old and new value. Plus, there's a slight, very slight fudge factor because you assume a certain growth rate. So it's not 9.3, the 7.3 divided by 9.3 and multiply the other. There's a very, very slight, because generally there's always some growth going on. So in a revenue neutral rate, there is a factor.
And there's also another factor is your collection rate. So if you got a 70% collection rate, that inflates that rate real up. We're fortunate we're staying at 97.5, 98 right there in which is good for our size county. So, but that's still
Thank you so much.
Richard, is that the 9.3 billion or the 7.3 billion, does that include real and personal? Or just-
That's everything, that's everything. So, which, and the reason I did that, because I want to show you how it affects more than just your housing we're talking about. It's much more complicated. But anyway, that rate there, it's a generic rate without the budget needs at the time, without the losses of any other revenue from the federal, state, or any mandated thing, any new expenditure, and no tax rate administered to it. Okay, 2011 utility values. This utility values are your telephone companies, your gas companies, your freight line companies, railroad companies, all that. That's $115 million. If the rate at present was 27.9, you can see it's $320,000 we collect. 115, that it should stay close to that. The new rate means they would go to 414 or a 29% increase. And that's generic. This is the next one is a Honda Accord. The rate is $22,290 at the tax rate $62 in tax. In 2013 it'd be about $20,000 value, but the tax goes up $72 for a 16% increase. See, those are personal properties. Those are valued at 100% of fair market every year. Utilities by the utility companies and the vehicles by us. And the vehicles will soon be done when you go get your tag. January 1, 2013, you'll start buying your tags down at DMV. And when you go in there, if your tag was $28 for a pickup truck, well, add $72 on top of it right now. So you'd pay them $100 to get your tag. And then they'll reimburse the county. So all this is coming down the line. But you can see that tax is going up too. This one is probably the one that will people really don't understand. It's use value. Use value is your agriculture, horticulture, and timber land that meets certain criteria, and the farmers get a tax break. The market value on this particular property, this is true property, was $355,000. The use value is $32,000, so they pay on the $32,000 value. At the present tax rate, it would be $89.84. In 2013, based on what land's going for, the value would go down to $205. The use value stays the same. And with the new tax rate, it would go up to $115.92, so he would have a 29% tax increase. And, you know, he said, well, my value went down, my taxes went up. But, see, they're paying on a value that is based on farming instead of real value. So, yeah, the real value drops, but the farming value stays the same, and he's going to pay more. Now this goes into housing. The first example, the value is $119, taxes paid was $334. The 13 value is $118,210. And these houses I actually are pretty close because they've sold and I used them as an example. So 2013 value is $118, dropped a little bit, but the taxes actually goes up 27.3%. The next example is a $337,000 value. Taxes were $942. The new value is $300,000, and the taxes will go up 14.8%. And you ask why the difference? Well, see, then you get in statistics. You got a coefficient of disbursement. So how far out from the median you are. If you go way down, your coefficient gets larger. You get farther away from median, you're going to pay less or pay more depending how far off from that you are. So that's how that works out. The next one is $1 million house, 1.4 million. $1 million house, $2,000 taxes. The new value is $733. Their property taxes would drop 9.3%. The second one is a $560,000 house. They pay $1,500 in taxes. The new value is $350, and it's going to drop 24% on taxes. And all this is based on, you know, it may have been high, it may have been overpaid in 2006 for the property. Now, you know, those type houses are not selling, and that's pretty common. I think you see it up in the Highlands around the Mirror Lake area, where the old houses that we would call cottages, true cottages from the 50s, sold for $300,000 and $400,000. Well, people are not giving $300,000 and $400,000 for them now.
Even buying them?
Huh?
Are they even buying them yet?
There's some. I mean, there's always stuff selling, but the sale numbers are so low. I mean, so you can't.
The quantity.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I've
mean-
heard of, I mean, every sale that I'm aware of, I've talked to relatives along the way. I mean, they're selling so little for on the dollar. I mean, that's pretty typical. 560 might sell for 350 now.
It's a buyer's market, so I mean, you can go in there and
No doubt.
offer something, and you may get it, so take a checkbook. Okay, pros and cons of 13, next one's gonna be pros and cons of 15. The pros are, you equalize values adjusted to whatever the market is right now, and whatever that market is. Keeps reval cycles short, 4 years, 6 years are short. And keep politics out of it. This is an exercise. You don't want it to be, really politically jarred, because you got 2, 3 different party groups out there, and you don't want to be fighting. You just want the true answer. Cons are, you got low volume sales, unqualified sales at 54%. All property types don't have sales, and we still by law have to put values on them. Commercial sales are non-existent. Scheduled values are hard to develop. The process would create more questions than answers. Taxes would rise in all classes of properties at different rates, and that goes back to the COD. Even though I may have $1 million house and it may go down a little bit, you saw 2 examples, you still could have an increase. Even if you got a lower rate, you could go down and maybe have a lower decrease. The appeal process would be prolonged. And I think that's the reason for that is there'd be so many questions, and you've got to go, you got to spend the time answering the questions. Pros and cons for 2015. Pros, time for economy and sales to recover. More property types selling. Schedule values would be better to defend. County is mandated to do in 2015, so that's the drop dead date. You can't get no extension. Except for land acreage, lots and exclusive second home, reval is really not needed until 2015. The average pricing of homes, you got a market in every county or every area that you need so much housing supply for the basic needs of your permanent full-time resident and the ones that are living in the county permanently. So those homes are going to be, 1 or 2 types. One, just the very modest living quarters, and next is a little bit better, and finally, a nice subdivision. But you only have so many people in each one of those classes, and they're going to fill up the housing market, and then those houses are going to stay pretty stable, because as people relocate, move, and that, they're going to come into the market trying to find that type of housing. All property values would be kind of stable until 2015, but they would be stable based on 2007 values. The cons against that, the economy would stay flat with little change in sales. The news today was in one national publication that $1 million homes sales were up 0.7% last year, $1 million and above. And Charlotte paper, there's an article about foreclosures putting dampening the sale price increases because there's so many foreclosures in the market that it dampens the average pricing on average homes. And then, of course, the third thing was the stock market down 500%, 500 points today. So, you know, investment money is being shifted to more stable markets. So where real estate come and play, you know, anybody try to figure that one out.
If I could ask a question on that, just so I can clarify, when you say the economy would stay flat, you're saying since there's not more money, more potentially, people might not be buying houses.
Correct.
I mean, that's basically
What you're saying there is that there may be nothing different in 2015.
It may be nothing different. It may be the same thing. Could be
Yeah.
worse. I mean, we can't tell the future. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah, it's it's unknown, but it could be no better than it is now, or we could potentially have an improvement.
yeah.
But even a slight improvement, I mean, am I right or wrong, Richard? If we had, I mean, I'll go back to this chart here, and if I'm reading it wrong, you correct me. The way I read that is that for most Maconians that live in, the vast majority live in that 299 or less house.
Correct.
But yet, they're gonna, you know, they're the ones that's gonna have the potential to be hurt the worst with the reval.
They'll be hit at every angle. All their personal property,
The cars,
you know,
the house,
cars, their boats, their camping trailers, everything will be hit on them.
And that's because I hear you saying that the more valuable properties and the undeveloped land will have a larger decrease in value percentage-wise
Correct.
than the smaller properties. So what,
Correct.
to pigtail what Ronnie said, so the person who owned the $150,000 home on 1 acre, if we kept a revenue neutral number, that person would actually see their taxes go up, and the larger home would see their taxes go up.
In a lot of cases, many cases.
My biggest issue is kind of another issue that Richard spoke to. I don't have a problem with that per se, because when houses are going up so much, those people were just tripling their taxes or doubling or whatever. But my issue with it is if we don't have good comps, I don't want to put the county, which that means taxpayer to me, I don't want to put us at risk of trying to defend a lot of revaluations that we might have a very hard time of defending. You might speak to that, Rich. I mean, that's traditionally we've done a great job as a county of being able to defend the valuations we put on property, because we've had plenty of comps to work off of and pretty rock solid cases. But if we don't have many comps, it's a whole lot easier, correct me if I'm wrong, to get an appeal, a winnable appeal. Because you can say, well, you know, that closest comp you used was 5 miles away, you know, that's a different zip code to me. I mean, that's...
Well, what happens is you kind of open a can of worms that you don't intend to open. Up until we do a reval, everything is frozen back to January 1, 2007. So if I go out there last month and bought a property for $500,000 and it's $1 million, well, that $500,000 sale is not recognized by the tax commission as valid information to defend or increase the value of a property. So basically, it's
after the fact.
It's after the fact. I mean, you can't bring it in. When I go out there and I say, okay, everybody in the county, these are your new values. Everything's fair game. So when I come in and say, I bought this house for $500,000, here's the contract. Well, was that an arm's length transaction? Yes, it was. Well, didn't Mr. Jones sell that to you and his wife and him decide to go back to Florida? They short sell it. It don't matter. I didn't know him. It was advertised. I made an offer and I got it. Well, even though I may have some sales, in years past you had 3,000 sales a year, you'd have plenty of sales to say, well, these ones sold and the market is actually here. We won't have that, so when they go to Raleigh, that opens where, you know, the best information we
You don't have that argument.
is that argument. The equitable situation kind of goes out the wall because they want to be fair to the public. At the same time, if that's the best information you got, they don't care about all of your properties around it that may be out of kilter or whatever. So it opens a whole new can of worms. We don't have the enough sales to defend things right now. Some we do, some we don't.
Is it fair to say, Richard, that right now, based on the '07 rebound, what we basically have is the relative, because of the number of comps that we had, because we had a broad cross-section, just like if you do a public opinion poll, and you ask 3 people, you better ask the right 3 or you don't have a real gauge on what public opinion is. Because we had a large number of comps, even though you could argue whether the true property value is right or wrong, or whether the true millage rate is where it needs to be to get to 26 million, what you do know you have is one piece of property relative to another is as accurate as we can make it. And if we go and do this without enough comps, you're going to skew that because you're doing the best you can, but we're really just guessing because we don't have the comps to back it up. And you're going to live with that skewed plane until you do the next rebound.
Correct.
You can also put the county at risk of having
Exactly.
to defend a lot.
And, you know, we're a legal entity, government's a legal entity. So Mr. Jones or somebody else, or Mr. or Mrs. with those little letters after the name, has to go with us to Raleigh at, you know, $300-400 an hour plus travel and all that. I mean, and that's, you know, we've done well and we've been fair to people, but if you go down there a lot of times, then you have to budget for that too. It's a real cost of the assessment. Your cost of assessment is, you know, not so much how much you can save for us doing it, but if we satisfy the public, if we answer the questions, and we spend very little on legal fees because we answered the question. If it gets away from those 3 or 4 items, then it creates a situation where they're going to question the board. If it's you guys and whether ladies come on next few times, they're going to question us, they're going to question the whole process. And see, right up until this time, we've been fortunate that we had the information, we showed them, and we got the most advanced technology in most counties, and you can see what houses have sold and everything. But now you go out there and start even using our website, you're not going to find. I'd search for half a day in the Highlands area for a certain type of house. I didn't find one yet. So that's what you limit you to.
Let me say this, Rich, talking about these houses that, well, as Commissioner Portman's talked about, like around 150,000, we're getting people off the street every day. And we're out here talking to us about lowering the prices, the values of properties. And if you go out and you look at what property is selling for, and as you're talking about arm length sales or foreclosures or whatever, everything that's selling is selling for a fraction of what it was selling. The only thing about it is, and like we had mentioned before, these people who are pushing to get a reval in this middle class, what's on their mind is this, and it's something that I deal with every day. Now, we're looking at $26 million, and we're going to have the operating county budget brought in on revenue property. What these people has in their mind was, let's go back to about 2003. Can you just roughly give me a ballpark figure of what this income was then? Somewhere just high or low, I don't care.
Income, you mean budget needs?
No, what I'm saying, we're looking
Value?
at 26,000. How much was it back in
26 million.
18? I mean,
I
yeah.
have no idea.
Just
That's a
rough.
finance.
All right, let me use a comparison.
The
okay?
tax rate was, I can tell you about what the tax rate was. It's 40,
32.
Well,
43 then?
What I'm coming down to the point of this is, let's just use a figure and say that it was $18 million, and now it's 26. In the mind of the people that's out here, if this property comes down, they're expecting not to be able for us to take in $26 million to run the budget. They're expecting to lower the budget back down to $18 million. And when we try to explain to them that there's a problem, Commissioner Cooper mentioned this the other day. We was talking about what are we supposed to do? Cut the police department, or the sheriff department down, the health care down? Are we supposed to take this away, take this? They trying to explain this out here is why But I want for the people to really be involved in seeing what we're up against, that we're gonna have to have $26 million to run the budget. Don't matter if the value of this property goes down, the millage rate goes up.
Well, and that goes back to Mr. Hagan, it's two distinct processes. The financing process of the county and the assessment, and, you know, go back to those years, we didn't have 2 or 3 new schools that we're paying for, and maybe a water line or whatever. So that figures now, and we have to pay for, and that's long-term debt. And the value, let's say, in this, we cut everything down to $4.5 billion, what it was back in 2003. Next year, the tax rate would be 56 cents. You get a tax bill of that $150,000 house, and they would be paying almost the exact same thing as they paid this year. So, I mean, that's the life of these two items.
I mean, to be fair, this group of commissioners is one before you. Our total budget has gone from 49 million to 42 over the past few years. So Macon County has cut what we take in to operate a budget. Purposely cut that because of what's happening in the economy. So if it's fair to say that we would still, if we hold that amount of spending, then we would have to do a revenue neutral budget to make that happen, adjust the rate. And what I hear you saying is that might be difficult to fairly do that. But with that said, let me sort of play devil's advocate with you. Go back to what Brian said. You would have maybe a shift of the amount of tax money taken in would be exactly the same.
Correct.
Exactly the same.
And that's
If we
some
said
major
revenue
budget
neutral,
cut.
the total monies that come in from ad valorem taxes would be exactly the same. The difference would be different groups of people and or sometimes different houses within a price group
Would pay different.
would pay differently. So let me play devil's advocate. You know, if it's possible to do it, why don't we go ahead and do it and just let the cards fall where they may? I mean, that's the question we're gonna get from people.
Well, I mean, that's what we're discussing tonight, and that's what we've got to decide in the next
Just
week
do
or
it
so,
and
because
let
we gotta
him.
let Mr. Lightner know.
Well, and that's the whole, you know, and I think some of you talked to Stan Duncan down at the County Commission Association. Stan used to be with Department of Revenue, and then he's from Henderson County, a native there, and he took that job there. And Stan, and you know, it says, you know, let the chips fall, they fall, everybody pay their dues. And that's good. But this board needs to understand also, and I think it wouldn't be professional of me not to warn you that when these chips fall, that there is no guidelines of how they're gonna fall, because the economy is not like it was in the last 30 years.
And I guess the point, the big point I'm sort of coming to conclusion is that I think we all think in terms of the way things work. And right now, you and I talked about this. I don't know when things are going to be back like. You know, when is that going to happen? When is our economy going to return to the way it was? When are real estate sales going to return? Maybe we're living in the new normal. I don't know that.
Well, but my thought on that too, Commissioner Corbin, is that if in 2 more years or whatever, if the big ticket items come back just a small percentage, it changes the numbers drastically as far as who's paying the bulk of the taxes.
I agree.
And if the $1 million house comes back from 500 to 750, it's huge. So will it do that? We don't have that. I think everybody's off to Christmas.
Let me go back to where the chips fall where they may. That implies a random distribution of chips. I think we can predict with some degree of certainty where those chips are going to fall. So if we're going to go ahead, let's put the cards on the table and say where those chips are going to fall. Because I think, unfortunately, a lot of the people that are meeting us on the street are the ones that are going to get the biggest load of chips.
Yeah.
And they're not seeing that right now.
If you go
But
back
I believe not to say the chips fall where they may. The chips are going to fall
Where they do.
where they do, and we pretty well know where that's gonna be.
Yeah.
And so,
And I can
my
tell you-
concern is if we choose to go ahead, and I have not, certainly not made up my mind yet, but if we choose to go ahead, then we owe it to the people of this county to say, incoming chips, okay? The chips are coming, you know, get ready, because you guys right here, as you said it exactly right, the amount of taxes that are collected will be the same. All we're determining by going ahead or not going ahead is who's gonna pay those
How that's
taxes.
distributed.
It's that
And-
simple.
And I think the average person, because I think this is, there's a lot of information here, and you've done an excellent job presenting that. And it's hard for all of us to grasp all of it,
Yes.
and understand it. So I think the average person that we talk to on the street has the idea that if we go ahead and do the reval, that their house is gonna go down in value and their taxes are gonna go down.
Well,
And
That's it, that's what I.
that's what people think.
well, I can tell you right now, you just wanna know where the chips are gonna fall. And it was in this information,
That's
when you
what I
go
was gonna
back
ask
and,
you, but you put
and
it
look
in
at the
there.
first couple pages.
Yes, it's right there.
It,
Chips
You
will
know,
fall at that.
Chips gonna fall right
just
there.
go
That's
pick up a
exactly-
real estate book and look, just anybody. The vacant land, the speculative lots are down, way down.
And large expenses.
Large homes are down, or second homes. I mean, there's always gonna be somebody in a class that lives here full-time, as a businessman, or a doctor, or somebody is gonna have a very nice house, and, you know, their house may not change because of the neighborhood they're in, or location, or whatever. But the majority of those houses are down, and we know the percentages, 30% or better. And it goes back to the housing market. Those people you see at the grocery store or getting your car fixed and that, they're going to not drop as much as the others. Just as when things went the other way, they don't drop as much. So that means the burden and the majority of those chips are going to fall in their lap. And you compound that with their vehicles going to get increased, that their leisure boat's going to get increased, their campers that they spend on, that they're maybe slow down at work because they're in the building industry. You put that all together, and when you go in the grocery store, that's who you're going to talk to. Now that has nothing to do with what I do as a profession, but that's the reality of what's going to happen.
But one thing I'd just like to make a point of, especially with Commissioner Bill, Commissioner Cuppers, and Commissioner Corbin alluded to it, we have cut the budget about 5% a year over the last year. So we've like from 49 to 42, about 15% a little better cut. So we've been responsive to the revenues we've got. And this next year, we don't know. We'll wait till we see what our revenues are. By state law, we have to operate a budget based on what our prior year's revenues were on a formulation. So we've got to operate on that. I don't really have the, and I won't repeat this again tonight, but I don't really have a problem with how the evaluations might be, because people that were getting larger increases in home values should have been paying a higher value, and I think that works both ways. That's a two-way street. If you lost a lot of value in a home, you should get a tax break. Having said that, my whole issue is trying to look out for the taxpayers in this sense. I just don't want to put the county, which is the taxpayers, in a position of trying to defend a whole bunch of comps that aren't very accurate. And I've had this conversation with Richard. He's been doing this for a long time. And, you know, he tells me most of the time, hey, we've never lost a case. You know, we got rock solid data. You can't really dispute the data because in the past, how many sales we've had. Well, that's turned on its head right now. And he's saying, you know, hey, I was playing with 5 bullets in my 6-cylinder gun. Now I'm playing with 1 or 2. So that probably wouldn't be the case. And so if people want to, if we went forward with the reval, and people want to dispute those values, there's probably, and Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, there's probably no doubt they would, because they've had 0 success in the past, so it's kind of an easy mark, they would have more success than they've had in the past, because now we wouldn't have the information or the data to really bolster that was a fair valuation of the property.
They've got the same
That's
problem.
my
as-
problem. Agreed.
They've got the same problem as the county though, is they're gonna be grasping for sales as well, but the fact remains, there are gonna be people that perhaps will take a chance to challenge a value.
That might not have before.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other thing is every time you lose one of those, don't you end up chasing bad data farther? You see what I'm saying? Now that becomes a data point. It's not a sale, but it becomes a data
And
point.
sometimes it's a expensive process for neither side to win. There's a case recently in Hendersonville, there's a shopping mall. Well, the mall had X number of dollars, county had Y. Well, the commission said, well, we can't make decisions, we're gonna give you W in the middle. And you have to live with it.
They split the baby. It was 14 on one side. Was that meeting?
10 on the other
11,
side.
9?
9 or 10.
I think it ended up costing the county 2 cents on the taxes.
The mall or
I think just that one piece of property, 2 cents on the tax rate. So it's a big deal. But having served as on the Board of Equalization Review for many years, Richard's exactly right and Brian's right. I mean, people come in there and we would certainly listen to them, you know, day after day and hear their case and the board would vote on them. But for the most part, the county had the evidence.
Right.
And the burden of evidence goes to the taxpayers. When you come before the Board of Equalization Review, you have to present your case. The county don't have to, you have to present it. If the burden of proof is on them. And so they're going to struggle with the same thing that the county's struggling with to get that comp. But before, where we had advantage on the county at the taxpayer side, Richard, and you can stack this tax office folks up against anyone in the state, anywhere in the state. Oh, sure.
120 in the war.
Well, and this man's recognized as one of the top tax assessors in the state. So, and the staff. I mean, you see what Teresa McDowell done on collections and this economy. They're a pretty good crowd there. So, but going back, and Rich, I'm just asking the question. Going back to those days when I was on that board and we had those people come in that they would give their proof, and you'd give your proof, and in about 2 minutes they'd say, excuse me, I shouldn't be here. That would be much harder now.
Yeah, it wouldn't be very fun for anyone. It'd be a really trying time for all participants, including taxpayers. I mean, they want answers and you're not able to give them a definite answer or maybe not a complete answer. And so
When you tell Ronnie Hayden that his house was comped, his house, because he's got a big fine house, he lives on a big high dog house. Some of us lives in the little bitty place. So that's good. But like Ronnie's house, but if Ronnie's house, it's not, I don't think it's fair, you have to go by neighborhoods too. But when you start comping my house, the one at the Cola Safety Club, I mean, I'm going to kick on that. Everybody on this board, I mean, it's not a fair
well, and I think you
valuation.
have to look at, residential is one area. That's just one area we do.
That's
We
right.
do the commercial. So you have to do Kmart to buy. We bought the bylaws for the last 12 years and we won. But if they came in now, it'd be a different story because won't have sales here. So they'll have an MAI come in, they'll pull income approach from Georgia and South Carolina and Eastern North Carolina, and we don't have that data. So if it went to Raleigh, I turn around and I hire an MAI and pay them $15,000 to go with us down there, and then we get down there and it'd probably end up like the one in Hendersonville, to split the difference. So we're never.
Another thing we've not talked about at all here tonight is machinery. Is the factories that the people that have machinery inside their factories in Macon County, track hoes, bulldozers, machinery that you see sitting out there, this is all impacted by this reval. But there is a lot more to it than residential. I mean, every machine you see going up and down, and the same thing applies to the car. If it's my track hoe or whoever it is, don't that same philosophy apply to that?
Yeah.
So that's
And the one point well taken, The one thing you have a con here on 215 is the county would be back on an 8-year reval cycle. That could or could not be the case, whatever future board's gonna have to make.
Yeah.
Board to determine.
And there could be
We're not tying
legislative
anybody's
change.
hands by doing it.
Right, and traditionally, we always have been on the 8, except for the last 2 cycles, but like you said, Stan,
Duncan.
Yeah, I spoke with him, and Kevin, I think you might have been in that same meeting, and you know,
Yes.
everybody has a different view. I basically, my major view is gonna come from the person we pay to do that job in Macon County, which is Richard. But, you know, his thought was, you know, he's always said just 4 years and never get off 4-year cycle. But that varies all throughout the state. A lot of counties are on 8, some are on 4.
Well, the 2 largest counties are on 8, Mecklenburg and Wake.
Yeah. So, and the
It
other.
has been.
And the other thought, if we went to an 8-year, that would be saving the county money, it would, because we wouldn't have to do the reval so often, isn't that true?
Well, we do it ourselves, so, you know, we're fortunate, we don't spend like, I think in,
We don't pay outside person.
yeah, Jackson County had a recent figure that was pretty high, and,
What that was, you happen to know about what that figure was?
I think it was $1 million, was it?
I think you're getting pretty close.
They paid somebody.
And, so, you know, we wouldn't say, what we did is we arranged our offices to be self-sufficient in most areas. We do hire out some things we don't do, but not in $1 million.
So that's not quite the issue. I mean, there's not the savings there because we do it internally if we want.
Are there any other questions? I know this is complicated, you may have questions before you decide anything, but, you know, at any time I'll entertain your questions or you can come back.
I do have one question I think we all need to hear from you is basically, what is the, I don't even want to call it a drop dead, but what's a reasonable time frame for us to make this decision so that you, if you did need to move forward, it's not going to cramp your standard time frame?
I would like October,
By the end of October?
yeah.
So we might put this as an agenda item for October to come to some decision. We might have that as an agenda item that we need to decide by then.
So the question is, do you leave it alone that you guys move to 2013? Or move to 2015? It's an option to move to 2014. Would that make, that's not.
No, you might,
Not
no,
us, do.
but you're not gonna gain anything.
Technically you could, but there's no reason to.
There's no reason.
Richard, the taxpayers you talk to, are there any consolation, maybe this is a stupid question, but in my mind, it's not, as somebody that has commercial property, and a residential property also. But I know I can budget what I'm gonna pay in taxes right now. Forget the valuation. I know what I'm gonna pay. You know, and I don't think this board is looking to raise any taxes. And I know what my taxes is gonna be, next year. I know that for a fact, and in this tight of budget, that's important to me. Because I budget that out on a monthly basis. And I know it's important to this fellow right here too. The property he owns. He knows how much taxes is gonna be. To me, that is some consolation. Forget about the reval just for a second. I'm talking about the actual money that comes out of my pocket to pay my taxes. And knowing that how much I have to allocate each month to pay my property taxes, and that money's gotta be generated from somewhere. Has anybody, is that just off the wall? To me, I'd rather have, in a way, I'm just thinking how I feel. I mean, and for you sitting there and telling me, Ronnie, I don't know where it's gonna be. It ain't probably gonna be less. You know?
Well, it is a concern because the average person now, if you own a home and you have a mortgage, Macon Bank has a mortgage or something, and they see that the last 4 years your taxes are $800 and they escrow $800, well now all of a sudden it goes to $1,100. Well, the escrow $1,100, well your mortgage rate goes up.
And you're paying interest.
You pay interest and all that, and so you don't know stability, and that's one thing good about Macon County in the past is whatever cycle was on, the governing board has kept the tax rate kind of stable, and your taxes have stayed stable for 4 years or 8 years. We've not had a lot of fluctuation in the tax rate, so people can manage whatever that rate is over a period of a
In
year.
this
or
crazy
two.
environment, it just gives me a little bit of comfort to know, this is what I gotta
Confidence
pay.
there, of knowing for certain what, that.
What you gotta pay.
Yeah, one thing though, you don't pay interest on your escrow.
No.
You don't pay interest on the escrow, but your monthly
But your
payment.
monthly
goes
payment
up.
goes up.
I've had mine go up, like when we did the last reval, I think mine went up a
But you
hundred
live in
and
that.
something.
Yeah, but I live in the lower end of.
Speaking about this, the way I see it,
Russ
and
County,
talking
it's
about,
that-
and talking about 2015. As I was saying before about the people that's coming to us all the time and asking about, you know, if this is reevaluated, my property taxes go down, but everything that I'm reading from the time we've been to, the sessions and Concord right on, and right now, the people this is gonna hit the hardest is the people that suffer the most. Our best bet would be for them, would be waiting for 2015.
That's right.
That's what the numbers, that's pretty.
That's what everything is showing,
That's
and I'm gonna tell you what, these are the people hurting the worst that needs it the most.
And hopefully some of them will read what the media
Well-
is covering now, and because they're gonna share that same
Hopefully we're saying good
information.
enough.
So hopefully they'll educate themselves to that
Well,
fact.
here's where I stand on this right here. If there's any way I could do it and I still pay the bills, I'd cut people taxes in half, and I think everyone would know that, but the people who are hurting the worst right now is not really seeing, I'm gonna say this right here.
They don't understand.
What I want them to do is see where we're coming from. And I think any one of us sitting here that is not trying to help these people.
Well, and let's make it clear too, I think the takeaway from our discussion, I think we're going to vote on it, and I think the consensus is that I feel like all five of us are of the opinion that whenever the tax reval is done, that is going to be done as a way of raising revenue. That's not going to be what that is. So our goal is to keep our total tax bill at what it is or lower. We've lowered it since 2004. We have lowered the county's budget, so I think in these economic times, our goal is going to be to keep our budget at or below what it is.
I want the public to know and see what we're doing, and I know that we're not gonna please people 100%, I don't care what we do. That's the bottom line, Richard, but if we're trying to do the best we can to keep this as low as we can, then we're looking at how much it's gonna cost us, that we will save and have more money here to put this off a little bit later. So we're gonna gain on that respect too, as money spent out.
Rich, let me just ask you one way. 'Cause somebody will ask us this if they haven't asked it already. We've been dealing with every 8 years and then every 4 years, an increasing market. Okay, things are more valuable than the last time we did the reval. This is the first time in any of our memory that it's the opposite way, depending on the swung the other way. So that's what's making this difficult, is because it's something we've never dealt with. So what about the argument of if you wait till 2015 to do it, it's going to be the same thing. Why not go ahead and do it now? It's going to be a tough thing because you're going to have people question. It's always gone up. It's going to be going down now. That changes the dynamics completely. Why not go ahead and do it and get it done?
Well, there's a couple things. First off, you may have the sales you need for all the different types of properties. Right now I was in one area in Highlands, and I hate to pick on Highlands, but you know, they had some sales come through, and we was looking at them. In this one area, one thing sold about 30% lower than what we had on it. A similar house sold right up the street for 20% more than we had on it. So which one's which?
And are you saying, so if you get to 2015,
You'll have more sales and more data.
We hope.
you'll have,
Hope.
well, not per year, but you'd have data from
Collectively.
2009, 2010,
Yeah.
2011,
Yeah.
2012.
See, like if I'm doing appraisal, if I had a lot of sales, I'd take the last 6 months. But if I don't have sales, I may go back a year. If I don't have sales, go back 2 years. You know, that's allowable.
That's what I'm saying, people are gonna say, we're living in a different world. It's a different world than we've all been used to, and is this the new normal? And if it's a new normal, why not just do it?
And that-
How do you answer that?
And the sticker shock. It's not gonna be the sticker shock where your values go way up. It's when the taxes come due.
Yeah, so
that's
your value
different.
goes down and your tax bill goes
Hopefully,
up.
like Ronnie said, the things that have dropped off the most will start seeing a market again and start going the other way. And we're talking just, percentage bands.
A little bit.
And if things start going up, then you're broadening the tax increase to a greater number of type of properties.
The other possibility exists, and we don't know, I don't have a crystal ball, I don't think anybody does, but if you look into your crystal ball and you say 9.1%, is it gonna be 9.1% in 2015? Gosh, we all hope not. So it's not just the fact that the tax bills go up, it's the ability of some people to pay that tax when it does go up. It's gonna go up, maybe for some of these people anyway, but if we can get some people back to work, if we can improve the economic conditions, even if the real estate market hasn't caught up yet, at least the people that are writing the checks now have money in the bank to write the checks with.
Yeah.
And that's my concern, is the pressure, you're gonna put the same pressure on them whether you do it in 2012, or maybe not, but it shouldn't be any worse in 2015 than it would be in 2013. However, they may be in a better position to make those payments in 2015 than they are now. And so, I agree with Ronnie, I don't think there's a person up here that isn't trying to look after everybody we possibly can. It's a tough call, and I think we need to think hard on it.
Well, there's another thing right now too. You talking about the comps. And being out here in every day with real estate transactions, right here's what's going on. Foreclosures and short sales and things like that where there's pressure on people, they got to, that's why it's traveling. But if you've got a home that you paid $200,000 and just because somebody says real estate's selling for, hey, if I walk up to you and you don't need the money and I say, I'll give you $100,000, you know who's selling your house and lose $100,000. That's common sense, tell you. That's why property is not selling. People are not going to sell it unless they're losing.
Well, first of all, I've got a home in Jackson County. It's valued at the county on Jackson County. It's valued at $638. I've had on the market for $385 and that got sniffed. Tell you where we're at.
Richard, one follow-up question on Ronnie. Jackson County is going through this now, are they not? And they would be very similar to us as far as having undeveloped land, second homes.
Yeah, and Kevin works for both of us. That's how we can afford to do what we do, because Jackson County and us are real similar, so we share personnel.
So what's happening there?
Well, Kevin, correct me. They have a big drop in value, same as we do on certain properties. The other properties are going up. They got so many college kids that they have to put in housing, so their housing is still going to get their rents and they're still going to be worth something. And the problem they're going to have is that they're going to have a big decrease in a lot of properties and the burden's going to shift tremendous.
Yeah, people that got student housing and keep them rented out,
And
the
the
values
comps
are
are
holding
going-
up, so they're gonna get a lot bigger tax bill.
And the big houses just put it out, the big houses in Castro, the high dollar, the big $1 million houses are gonna take a big hit.
And there is a market there for high dollar in Wade Hampton, that's a very exclusive golf course. Their prices probably won't drop what they would at Wildcat or something. Because it's very exclusive.
Right.
So, there is a market for certain things, and they'll be protected in value, but then when you come back, they're going to have the same tax question.
The other thing, and this might be saying it kind of more one-sided, but historically, when we were doing 8-year revals, the whole purpose of going to a 4-year reval was because of escalating home prices and trying to not drop a double tax bill on somebody in one fell swoop. We're not in that situation now. So it's a whole different issue. Like you said, it's upside down, but there's not a rush to worry about hurrying up, and that's why we didn't do the reval. One part of the reason, the other was we didn't have comps, but there's not that rush to hurry up and do another reval because everybody's property taxes are going to go up so much, or the property value, we don't have that issue right now. So that's kind of currently is a thing of the past.
And I hear what Richard is saying, and I agree with him. I guess in my mind, I'm like Bobby, I'm not making my mind up about this completely, but I agree with Richard that the difficulty is going to be that person that has an under $300,000 home. If we keep a revenue neutral, we take in the same amount of tax money, those people will likely see a tax increase.
And we might could shave it to a little less revenue neutral, but then that's gonna put
And try to take some
county
of that
services
off.
off
And the other
additionally,
side of that-
after all the cuts we've already made.
The other side of that, Richard, is what your buddy down there said is you know, hey, we're living in a new world, or if we're not, let's just do it, and however it comes out, it comes out. Let the chips fall where they're going to fall.
Now, one thing different about,
Make sure we tell people where they're gonna fall.
one thing about Henry,
Yeah, that's what I want.
Don't play, I got a secret. You need to let those people know
But
where
that's
the
the two
chips are
things we've
going.
got to consider.
That's exactly right. That's
Well,
right.
I think Commissioner Hayden had a valid, good point that,
It's a misunderstanding.
well, I mean,
Yeah,
these
which ones,
ones,
right?
well, I think of what Ronnie said about the very people that this is gonna hit the hardest.
They think.
Can the very people can least afford it.
Right.
And
That's
it's
only
And
only.
they're the ones that think they're gonna do
And they
that.
think they're gonna.
And they're the ones that think they're gonna get a tax cut.
And that's my only point, because one at a time out here on the streets, I'm trying to tell them as I talk to them, and that's why I want to make sure that they know. I was at the fair the other night. Somebody hit me up about this, said they was paying $400-something a year, and said somebody offered them such and such for the property, said they shouldn't have to pay over $150 a year on that. And so I explained to them about how we had to have so much money down the county. Well, that guy was fighting mad before he left. He said that we was all a bunch of crooks. They know.
We're a bunch of crooks, and he needs that fire department if his house is on fire. They won't never worry about that.
oh, and that's another thing, all your other tax rates will go up too.
What's that?
Your other tax rates will go up also.
The
Your
fire
fire
department.
departments and all that,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if their value's cut in half, they go
Their fire
up double.
taxes,
If the city, Highland City, if they go in half, their rates go up double. So I mean, everybody's affected, it's not like just certain parts.
Richard, I'll tell you what, I appreciate all the information you chose to
You've
give
done
us.
an excellent job.
When we went to Concord, I tried to listen to every word that was said and tried to see if I could figure out what would be the best for our county and people, same as the rest of us. But I appreciate it very
And
much.
we knew this was coming for our media folks, what we were talking about, I believe Ronnie and myself and Brian, I think we went, did you go?
I was there for, yeah, I had
We
to leave that up.
We went to a seminar about this, it was put on by the UNC School of Government. And it's not just Macon County that's dealing with this, it's every county. I was in a meeting at Chapel Hill this week, and I talked to people from the eastern part of the state. It's happening everywhere, and it's the same issue, is do you just go ahead and do it and let that redistribution happen? Or do you understand that if you're gonna have somewhat of a disproportionate revaluation or redistribution, like Ronnie said?
And we could very well have a disproportionate revaluation, if you wanna call it that. I call it equitable, but we could actually have that in 15, but at that point, that's the end of it.
Correct. And the
So
number of
we
counties
have
that's
given-
going back, they've even made a different procedure, the way I understand it now, if you want to exceed $1 and add the in taxes, it used to have to be a big deal. That ain't no big deal no more. $1 on 100. In a lot of
I can tell
counties.
you, Orange County is $1.52. I just bought a condo down there.
Mr. Lloyd, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Rob.
Well, gentlemen,
Kevin, thank you.
Teresa, thank you very much.
guys, I think that's all we have for tonight, except if we have a motion to go into closed session.
So moved, Mr.
I
Chairman.
got a motion second for the purpose of discussing a property acquisition, and we don't think we'll have any news to report coming out.
Okay, I'm sorry, what, can you start?
We're just going into a closed session for discussing possible property acquisition, but we don't expect any.
We're not taking action
Okay,
on this.
are you gonna talk, yeah, I know, are you gonna talk about this at the next, regular meeting?
The property acquisition, yeah, I'm sure probably, if there's some action that's been taken.
Will you make a
As we-
motion?
as we-
It'll be on